Hello, and welcome to the Employee Safety Podcast from Alert Media, where you'll hear advice from experienced safety leaders on how to protect your people and business. I'm Peter Steinfeld. Today's guest is Jeff Stoll, Associate Director of Championships, Safety, and Security at the National Collegiate Athletic Association, or NCAA. Jeff brings over 15 years of experience in law enforcement and public safety to his role, where he oversees safety and security initiatives for 90 NCAA championships each year. Jeff shares his strategies for scaling safety and security for each event based on the needs of the athletes, venues, and fans. Let's hear from Jeff. Hey, Jeff, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here, Peter.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into it. Can you start by providing an overview of your role at the NCAA?
Sure. My title at the NCAA is Associate Director of Championships and Alliances, overseeing safety and security. What that entails is providing strategic guidance and acute support for all of the 90, soon to be 91 championships that run here out of the national office in Indianapolis, and try and help our champ managers set their events up for success as much as possible across all three divisions.
So with so many venues that you have to worry about, how do you approach risk assessments that inform your security recommendations? Like, what are your go-to strategies or tools?
We start at the national office here, and then what I've been doing is every season I have a risk assessment meeting with all the sports that are going in season. So right now we're in the winter season. We're just about to go through the championship season for those. So I meet with each sport in each of the divisions, so Division 3, Division 2, Division 1. We talk about what their sport's looking like, and then what their venue might look like, if they have any athletes, coaches of notes. The champ managers are really the point people for the events. And so I rely on them to provide me, hey, I have this concern or this issue might come up. And then we can dive deeper into that if there's a security related issue, but I rely on them to provide their assessment. I think once we get that, then we're able to connect with the local venues and work with them based on whatever risk we've identified. So there's a risk mitigation internally by sport, and then we look at the risk assessment done by the host and the venue and combine those together to make our overall comprehensive risk assessment. Some of the resources that we've used with local public safety partners, with the state and local intelligence fusion centers, where we are able to filter and identify information for them to analyze, review any sort of harassment. And then from a macro perspective, we've had a great success in partnering with Department of Homeland Security in having several events go through the Special Event Assessment Rating, or SEER rating. And that helps us classify and generalize some of the resources that we need for each event. And so just supplementary tools that we're able to rely on some of our public safety partners at the local, state, and federal level.
It seems like collaboration is really big. So do you continue that collaboration effort with local security teams after providing the initial assessment?
Absolutely. And I think the biggest first step is the introduction. And again, I rely on my champ managers to set up a introductory call with our host and subsequently the host local public safety agencies. And so then once we establish that line of communication, we're able to talk as much or as little as we need and work through, the issues that come up. With those introductory calls, the collaboration then is set up. And sometimes it's just a small conversation for a small issue or a small question. And sometimes we have ongoing meetings, weekly or daily, leading up to it. Either way, once we get that initial connection, we're able to collaborate from either side very efficiently and effectively for the event.
How crucial do you think that fluid collaboration is to your overall success?
Significantly helpful to our success. I think part of it is because security issues can sometimes come at you pretty late in the game and unexpectedly. And so when you go to have a meeting or have a discussion, it's so much better to talk to someone you have already talked to and have a relation with, rather than an introductory call and then talking about a critical incident right away.
Well, scaling safety efforts, I think, probably is a big challenge for you, especially when events can range from sometimes massive Division I sports, like I'm in Austin, Texas, and the University of Texas Longhorns events are massive, to maybe a smaller scale Division III event where maybe just a few hundred or 1,000 people show up. So how do you do this successfully?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a wide spectrum between some of our Division One top tier sports and our Division Three sports. Generally, Division Three less attended than some of our Division One, and then Division Two kind of sits there in between. And there's a wide range based on sport, based on team, based on location. And going back to some of that risk assessment, I think that's the biggest first step, right? To get an understanding, what is our crowd going to look like? What is the event going to look like? We want to know if there's going to be, is there going to be 500? Is there going to be 1,000? Is there going to be 25,000? It doesn't really matter what that amount is. We just want to make sure that we're prepared for what we expect it to be. Using an athletic metaphor, even in those small events, Division Three, you want to have good fundamentals. So it doesn't matter if you are checking credentials for 25,000 or 250. You still want to make sure that you're doing the same best practices for that access control, that ticket scanning, even at a Division Three level compared with Division One.
So it sounds like at its core, you've got a set of solid fundamentals that you're going to use 100% of the time, but you have to make sure those fundamentals can scale. Is it something you've had to put a lot of thought into?
Yeah, so we've tried not to standardize some of the safety and security measures. We'll talk about different parts of the spectrum that you can have it and just provide general ideas for the venue to consider. And not to mention size, but geographic footprint and location. And there's so many variables that could go into each sporting event that we host and each college event just in general, that it's really hard to identify some very select specific standards. So we've tried to approach it from the standpoint of, here's what we've seen to be successful. How can we work within this concept? And in which end of the spectrum are we able to do? Because infrastructure, finances are going to be different. How do we make sure that that works? And what are the other resources that we can tap into? I had previously mentioned the state, local, federal resources where you can get things in place for your event if we're having conversations ahead of time.
Can you share maybe an example of how this process works in practice?
One of the unique things about our events is we are often coming to a neutral stadium for our event. We're bringing teams from outside of a location inside to a national championship venue. And so sometimes I use the term affectionately, we're bringing baggage to the event and to the venue. So what I try and do is alert our local host partners, here's the baggage that we're bringing. Now, what I trust and I know is that our local partners are really good at monitoring the threats to their venue. What they may not always be doing is checking on the noise that's associated with the teams that are coming. And one of the examples highlighted is related to women's gymnastics. So we have two very high growing sports with women's volleyball and women's gymnastics. It's been great to see that growth and exposure, a lot of positive energy associated with that. But with that also comes some negative exposure. So in our national championship host, they weren't necessarily monitoring any of the online harassment and subsequent conversation related to some of our student athletes. But they wouldn't know to do that because that's not local to them. So once I was able to share, hey, here are the teams, here are the athletes, once they plugged that into their intelligence fusion center, they got a lot more information. They were very appreciative of that. And they, and subsequently us, were able to be much more informed and prepared for the event because we were able to share that information.
I think that's critical. What you just said is a lot of times when you're dealing with, I guess, an outside source that's coming in that you're not used to, your frame of reference and how you see the world and the lens that you look at the world through is just not the same as what you need to address this particular issue. So having someone on the outside like you that can come in and open up people's eyes and put a different set of glasses on their face to see the world differently can make a really big difference.
And to add on to that, I think we're seeing more online harassment with online betting, certainly some of the fan passion with college athletics. And so even in the regular season, which the NCAA isn't specifically facilitating that event, but even trying to encourage teams within conferences to say, hey, we've had a problem with this fan in the event that he travels to your away game. And so again, you're helping that team, that venue be more prepared for what's coming as opposed to scrambling to react to that situation.
Yeah, and I think this absolutely translates to any organization out there that is thinking about bringing someone from the outside to one of their venues.
Exactly. And in my previous position, that was all I wanted. If an event was coming, a speaker was coming, I just need to know what I'm going to deal with. And that way I can prepare my staff for it.
Well, are there any challenges or gotchas with your current process that you're just looking to improve?
Well, I think it's to kind of build on this topic of how are we soliciting and obtaining security information from teams as they're traveling to our events. And so we've started to implement more proactive approaches where we're asking teams, hey, have you been dealing with any issues over the course of the year? Have you been dealing with any topics over the course of the year that are relevant to you? Because we wouldn't think to know that. Obviously, I can't monitor over 100 volleyball teams to understand what's going on day to day in their lives. We've seen some recent examples with Caitlin Clark, with the stalker that she had dealt with. I don't necessarily know if there's someone from the University of Florida that's been dealing with an on-campus stalker over the course of the year. I would like to know that as we work into our national championship. So I think we're trying to be better at that and get teams to share that with us. And hopefully they're understanding that we're not trying to get that information only just to be better prepared for their event, to make their championship better by having a better assessment for them.
Do you think people generally aren't aware of these threats because it's just so new?
I think the challenge is people are too close to the issue and they're not necessarily recognizing as they travel, it may be impactful outside of their scope and it may impact other environments where they're dealing it with the day to day. We're trying to come in and say, hey, from the outside perspective, how is this going to impact our event collectively beyond just your team, your athlete, and just open that up a little bit more. So again, we're setting that championship up to be successful.
So if you look at the 100,000-foot view of what's going on out there, what new challenges or threats are emerging in event safety and security?
Well, college athletics is certainly going through a very dynamic stage with a lot of changes specific to name, image, likeness, or NIL, as it's often referred to, where you're having student athletes that are able to publicize their image in exchange for services or money. And so they're creating and cultivating a higher exposure and profiles, most notably on social media accounts. And so they are becoming as high, if not higher, individual attractions than the event itself. And again, that is just an important part of the risk assessment. If you have someone who is much higher profile, they may garner a little bit more attention beyond than what's normally expected for that sport or that championship. And that's just part of the risk assessment. So we've started to see that with some specific athletes. And that's one of the questions that I ask our champ managers. Hey, do you have any notable athletes right now that are really influencing the public based on their followers or their products or things like that? And one of the challenges we see is when you have a high profile athlete that's not in a high profile sport. So maybe you have a Division III golfer who has a ton of followers. Division III golf isn't a event where we would normally put a lot of safety and security resources based on our normal risk assessments. However, once you add this athlete to that equation, that may change the outcome of how you're deploying your resources.
Wow, yeah, money, fame, social media really seem to be changing the dynamic out there, and that's got to be making it, I wouldn't say a nightmare for you, it's just like a whole new set of things you got to deal with.
Yes, it's just another part of the risk assessment. I think it's just being informed about that and making sure that we know what's coming to us, but it's easy to incorporate in the overall equation.
How has your previous experience informed the way you approach safety at the NCAA? So I'm thinking like specifically about your background in law enforcement.
Before this position, I worked at a Division II school, Grand Valley State University outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and worked in their police department for 16 years. When I became a sergeant, I was put in charge of special events. And one of the responsibilities that I absolutely loved, obviously that love is now transferred to this position. But one of the things that I think is relatable to this position was I was at a Division II school. And while that event was not large when you compare with other events in the state, such as University of Michigan or Michigan State, on Saturday nights in the Grand Rapids area, that was the event to be at. And so we had to scale our operation to meet the needs of what that was like, even while not having the resources that you might see at the Division I schools like we've talked about. And so there was a lot of creative processes and partnerships with athletics and outside agencies to make sure that we were still running a first-class event, even if our resources and infrastructure may not have been as high as other places. And it was just that energy, still being a part of that was something that was amazing in my time there.
Well, given your 15 plus years of experience in the special event security space, what keeps you passionate about the work you do?
In law enforcement, the reason I got drawn into that was because every day was different, right? And I used to say in the office, every day is an adventure because you just never knew that to be the case. And I think that still transfers into this position when you're making risk assessment because variables are always changing. and you're making a decision and then something might change and you need to make a new decision. I think the other thing for me is being a part of all the positive energy and emotion associated with college sports events. I feel like sporting events in general are one of the most pure forms of drama. And when you're in stadiums and watching that and being a part of it, certainly when I say being a part of it, it's a loose term, but being able to benefit from that type of excitement is just so cool to be a part of.
What's the wildest event that you've ever had to plan for?
So I think that would be my time at Grand Valley State University. It was the fall of 2016. I was at home with my wife. I got a call from my captain, who doesn't normally call me at 9 o'clock on the night on a Saturday. And in law enforcement, if you're getting a call from your supervisor, that generally means something's about to happen. My wife had been married to me long enough to know that she just went to bed as I was answering that call, and come to find out that we were going to be expecting Secretary Clinton on our campus as one of her last campaign stops before the 2016 election. Basically, the call was, Secret Service is going to be here in the morning. I need you to be there. And so we met with the Secret Service in the morning, spent the rest of the day into the night, into the morning, planning that event, facilitating it all, getting it all in place. And obviously a lot of resources came together all at once. Secret Service, state police, certainly us on our venue, the local sheriff's office, and then kind of sitting there in that briefing, setting that up 36 hours after that initial call was quite a whirlwind. And I've had people ask me, how was it? And I never saw anything, right? I was working the event, so I was just running around getting stuff done. And I've never seen our campus so full for that event. But we are very proud at the end of the day to be able to be chosen for that and to be able to facilitate the event with a lot of tremendous assistance from a lot of agencies. But to go from couch to campaign visit in that short amount of time was pretty wild.
Well, I can see why you're still passionate about this work. To be able to respond to situations like that can be pretty darn exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I've got one last question for you before we wrap up here. Not all listeners have to deal with so many events and venues like you have to, but most of them have to deal with some each year. So what advice would you give to organizations looking to just enhance their event safety protocols?
The number one thing that comes to mind is after action reports and taking note of what has occurred in your event, or if it's a multi-day event each day. We try and incorporate that at the NCAA through our champ recap form, where our champ managers will step back in the days after the championship and talk about, in this area, this went good, or this didn't go as good. And we work towards capturing that information right then, so then we can apply it to the following championship. And back in my time in law enforcement, we used to do that on a weekly basis. And what we found was we had so much greater success when we got people to provide their opinions and feedback at the conclusion of the event that night. Because if you send out an email the following day or after the weekend, say, hey, what went good? Your participation rate was so diminished. Whereas once we were more deliberate and specific and engaging staff, especially the ones on the front line who are seeing things play out, we're able to get so much information and we can improve week to week, season to season. And so I really think those after action reports provide an opportunity for you to grow incrementally, leading to a much better event year over year for that situation.
Yeah, and the details are so much clearer in your head. So your recommendation is, after the last attendee is out, the door is shut, nobody leaves that's on the team, you get together, you talk about it, you relay as much information as you can, anything you can think of, just to make sure you capture everything and then can learn from it going forward.
Absolutely. And you can find follow-ups that you need to work with some partners where maybe it's not necessarily a public safety issue or it's a facilities issue. And then you're going back to those partnerships and communication that we talked about earlier on, where because that relationship is established, you can work together collaboratively to address those problems.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much, Peter. It was great.
To learn more about Jeff and his work with the NCAA, click the links in the episode description. You can also watch the video highlights on Alert Media's YouTube page. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. Stay safe out there.
Thank you for listening to the Employee Safety Podcast from Alert Media, the industry's most intuitive emergency communication and threat intelligence solution. To learn more about how to protect your people and business during critical events, Visit alertmedia.com. Until next time.